So thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate you spending the time. I know you do a lot with lithium mining local here in Idaho, but I feel you have a lot of knowledge in general, and I would love for you to share that with my audience. First of all, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Katie Fite. I live here in Boise, but I've been working on public lands issues, BLM and Forest Service lands issues in the West for decades now. I grew up in Pennsylvania, went to grad school in Utah State, ended up in Idaho, worked for Idaho Fish and Game for a while, and then quit that to work full-time on public lands issues, livestock grazing impacts to wildlife and watersheds, agency vegetation treatments where they claim they're doing good things for the land, but very often they're doing very bad things for the land and bad things for the climate. And just general assaults on public lands in general that will destroy, degrade habitat for species like sage grouse or red band trout, Lahontan cutthroat trout, you name it, and just sort of standing up for the public interest on public lands.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you've seen maybe a number of different issues come up. I know we got talking about the lithium mines, which we'll go into, but is that the case, as you've kind of seen a number of different attacks over the last decades or so?
Well, okay. For the past 20 years or more, sage grouse have been the big issue sort of in a large chunk of the interior West. And sage grouse are like the one bird species in the West where federal agencies have good, and state agencies have good records of their populations because they were a hunted bird species. So the various game departments in the western states actually counted the birds on the leks, and the sage grouse are readily countable from one year to the next because they have their breeding displays on what's called a lek area, and the males are highly visible. They strut around. You've probably seen the pictures of the males with their chest puffed out. Yeah, well, and it's very cool. But you can go, and the leks are in the same place from year to year. So you have a bird species you can count regularly in. They
have a long history of data.
Long history.
What's the leks again? Is that a species of birds?
No, the lek is the area. It's just the general term. It's like for a display ground. Okay. But in this case, it's like a communal display ground where the males assemble, and then the females just sort of quietly come in, check out the males, and the males are puffing out their chest, and it's drama, bird drama, and you have to get up like at 4 a.m.
to witness this.
Because it gets light really early in like late March or April when all the action on the leks is happening, and you have to get yourself in position to get very close. Sometimes you can drive right close to leks. Sometimes you have to hike in quite a ways. So that's why we know that sage grouse are going down, down, down. And some years they go up, some, and then they go down. But then the highs get lower and the lows get lower. It's
so the trend over time is kind of less activity, less.
Fewer numbers. Okay, and sage grouse are sort of then the sort of iconic species. BLM likes to call them the umbrella species, even though in many ways each species that lives in sagebrush country has specific needs and different needs. Sort of the umbrella species for the the ecosystem, well-being of the sagebrush ecosystem. Okay. Yeah. And the sagebrush ecosystem is falling apart these days. We know how to break it. We sure don't know how to fix it. We have poured hundreds of millions, God knows, maybe it's billions now, of dollars into trying to restore sagebrush habitat, and we can't do it.
Restore it from man damaging it?
And from fire, but often the fire is linked to this exotic weed, cheatgrass, which of course here is all over the Boise foothills. And cheatgrass is this exotic annual grass that has been spread by livestock grazing, roads, etc., by human disturbance and livestock moving across the landscape, etc. And it loves fire, and it helps fire spread really quickly, flash across the landscape, because it's just like continuous vine fuel. Whereas the native sagebrush ecosystem here, it had discrete clumps of bunch grass, then like the wildflowers, like the balsam root, discrete clumps of native wildflowers, and then in between is this protective living soil crust of lichens and mosses and blue-green algae, and then the sagebrush and some other shrubs, some bitterbrush, some other shrubs. Well, what happens is you just start disturbing the native plants and the native crust, like with trampling or road blading or whatever. Boom, you create disturbed soil, and in sweep the weeds like cheatgrass and weeds like Medusa head, which maybe even worse, attire and silica, and just nothing ever grows.
So it kind of helps facilitate those invasive.
And those weeds help facilitate fire. And we do not know how, once these weeds get a grip on sagebrush ecosystems, we don't know how to get rid of them.
They just take over, sort of?
And there have been all these herbicides. BLM has been dumping herbicides out. It doesn't make any difference after a few years. The weeds are just there. And,
really?
Yeah, and the lower the elevation is, the more harsh the conditions are with heat, hotter temperatures, and everything, less precipitation, the more difficult it is to try to deal with cheatgrass.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So cheatgrass is a doom factor.
It is. Uh-huh.
And and other flammable annual grasses are in the West because they're totally alien to this ecosystem.
Wow, it's fascinating. It reminds me of the fragility of the fragility of the land, and how everything's so specific, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And here. And our mentality toward it, and the federal agency's mentality toward how do we restore lands, it's basically almost this farming mentality, But farming doesn't work in arid landscapes because you're totally dependent on the weather differences from one year to the other, vagaries in weather, and you just don't go in and you break it apart like you do if you BLM with its big Amazon seed drills roaring across the landscape.
Yeah, man will tame the
man
nature
will
land.
tame and spray herbicide everywhere. And of course the chemical companies love it, but in the end it doesn't make any difference, And it's just like, and it always harms non-target species, even though they say, this is selective, it'll just prevent the seeds from germinating or whatever. Well, wait a minute, is that going to prevent any native seeds?
It's
native
crazy when you
seeds
start
from
really
germinating.
peeling back and you see all these things that they're doing.
Yeah.
So that's your background, and you've been involved in that type of thing. But so how long have you been involved with the lithium aspect?
Okay, I truly have
play?
not worked on mining as a public lands activist with any full immersion until the lithium mining boom suddenly hit this beautiful, beautiful sagebrush landscape, some of the best remaining sagebrush there is anywhere in sort of the Idaho and Nevada borderlands country and the Oregon and Nevada borderlands country. It's really, an empty as far as human occupation, white human occupation.
Well, you say
area.
untouched land.
Well, it's not.
To
not
a degree, to a high degree.
There's no place that's really untouched because we have this background level of disturbance of chronic livestock grazing, and then we also have BLM itself, the federal agency. I don't know if you've ever read Silent Spring, but in there,
I've heard of it.
In there, Rachel Carson describes the herbiciding of sagebrush and riparian vegetation in the West that was being done by the federal land management agencies in the late 50s, 1960s.
To prepare them for cattle grazing?
Well, that was sort of the outright, at that time, that was explicitly stated. These days,
they don't say it.
These days, this is a restoration treatment. We need more grass out there, so we're gonna But anyway, and the herbicides are primarily used these days in trying to restore habitat by killing weeds. However, it's in some places, agencies are still trying to kill sagebrush with herbicide. And there was just this 5-year study in Wyoming that was published that said it didn't make any difference. It was justified by, the herbicide was justified by, this will help sage grouse. No, it didn't. But anyone could have told you that. The bird's name is sage grouse.
Yeah.
It needs sagebrush. And it does not need human manipulation of sagebrush.
So how do you, I have my own theories, but I'd love your theories on how a study like that, like you said, it sounds like a federally funded study that said, hey, if we do this, it's going to help this species. How did those studies come about based on your experience?
How did they come about? Well, back to the past 20 years have sort of been based on, sage grouse has been this focal issue in the West. And so, of course, state and federal agencies have been united in their effort to prevent sage grouse listing under the Endangered Species Act.
To prevent it. They don't want it listed. Why do they not want it listed under the Endangered Species Act?
Because then a lot of these harmful, exploitative activities on public lands, on lands that you and I and everybody supposedly owns, would not be allowed to continue the way they have been, eating away at sagebrush habitat and sage grouse habitat. And the sage grouse habitat is really complex. It goes beyond sagebrush. And so it's been, and of course the federal agencies have, I don't know if you understand the structure of the Interior Department.
Not really.
Okay,
but
okay. There's that's a cabinet level position. The Interior Secretary,
okay.
The current Interior Secretary is Deb Haaland. She's a Native American indigenous person from New Mexico. Okay, and then of course under Trump there was Ryan Zinke, and he was he was very much vilified. And before that there was Sally Jewell, and before that there was Ken Salazar. But it doesn't matter who the Interior Secretary is,
the same thing continues to happen. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the same thing. And you asked me about the research. Well, you want to do to be a researcher, and do like a 5-year study, you need a significant amount of funds. And so you have to do studies sort of in a certain way, almost. Yeah. And what we don't have, I think you and I earlier were talking, I mentioned the role of land-grant colleges in the West. There's so much that happens on public lands. And the whole management philosophy goes back to the land-grant colleges, which were a product of, exploiting the land,
right.
For agriculture, for mining, for timber, essentially. And the land-grant colleges are where most of the folks that work in the agencies go to school, and then the research that gets done is often associated. It's just it's this huge complex.
Wow.
It's the history of continued sort of domination of the earth and the land in the West, with a frontier mentality, watered down in many ways.
Sure.
But it's that we can figure out a way. We can go in and bust it up, but we can figure out a way to make it all work out in the end. And with sage grouse are proving you can't make it all work out in the end, because these ecosystems are fragile. You can't keep allowing all this disturbance to take place. But back to the borderlands country, I'll call it the borderlands country, southern Idaho, northern Nevada, southern Oregon, northern Nevada. Again, here you have a landscape where the oil and gas boom has not hit, okay? You look at what happened to sage grouse in Wyoming, portions of Colorado, Utah, boom, 25 years ago or so, oil and gas became a big, big thing. And so a tremendous amount of habitat was lost, and it continues to be lost in Wyoming due to oil and gas, okay? Mm-hmm. This area that I'm talking about didn't have that development. So that means that it was a relatively intact landscape. Fires were a big problem, but
but
there's
no
still
destruction
sagebrush.
from
Yeah, but no destruction from purposeful going in and building roads, bulldozing off sagebrush, noise, and visual disturbance and all those things. And it turns out sage grouse are really sensitive to noise, and they're really sensitive to like visual, like bright lights and stuff. And there have been a couple recent studies on that. Recent by, one was I think like 2010, 2012, studies in Wyoming about, the road traffic associated with oil and gas development. That's noisy. That impacts the number of birds on the lakes. And it impacts the
it's
sage
common
grouse.
sense, really, but
It's common sense. You got to do this elaborate stuff. No, and see, that's what it's about. It's about anybody, like if you and I were to go out in the sagebrush country, you would quickly see, you could quickly see how fragile the landscape was, and that, oh my God, you can see like huge distances. And those birds, part of their mating display, it's like this, it's this like
noise they make,
subtle sound,
sure.
that they need to hear, essentially, or and any biologist will think, that that's an important part of them hearing that,
sure.
etc. And also noise, covers up the sound of predators, moving toward them, etc. That noise would be a big problem. But no, we of course have to study.
They find a way to kind of say, okay, it's not as big a problem as we. And
the other recent study was quite recent. It had to do with geothermal plant development. Everyone thinks geothermal, not much of an environmental disturbance footprint. Indeed, there is, when you put it in the wrong places, like in the middle of sage grouse habitat on public lands in the West. And there's a huge push now for more geothermal and building transmission for geothermal and ripping and tearing things up for that. But anyway, the study was done. There were ormat plants, one near Tuscarora, Nevada. The other was further south near Austin and McGinnis Hills. And there, once again, it was like, the noise and visual disturbance from building essentially a factory in the desert harms the sage grouse. Well, gee whiz. And what is an industrial mega mine these days? Basically an open pit strip mine. What's that associated with that? Noise and disturbance like you couldn't believe. And dynamiting at times, and huge access roads, dust, bright 24-hour a day. Okay. So I'm sort of getting back to lithium mining, but my like immersion in mining and now lithium mining. So boom, we first started hearing about critical minerals. I think Ryan Zinke in the Trump administration, got to get them, got to have them, and they were talking more about like security needs. They weren't talking about.
For like military use and whatnot?
Security needs. You can hear the little war drums starting. And competition.
And these minerals, are these the minerals that go into EVs and stuff like that, or are they used for a number of different?
Well, they're used for a number of different like lithium. Primarily, it's for. I'm not a geologist, okay? Like for batteries and battery storage and things like that. But there are other rare earth minerals and everything, some of which are highly toxic, that are used, like everything from wind turbines to your iPhone, and this separate from the lithium mining. And Idaho focused, but up in the Salmon River country, we have now cobalt mining once again rearing its ugly head. And there's just
so there's many different minerals that they're going after.
Yes, in country that is still undeveloped. And if you look at the West now, you see there's development here, there's development there, there's development whatever, and we're just eating away at some of at the last remaining wild, relatively intact landscapes.
Wow.
And so but the lithium boom. The Thacker Pass lithium mine. Let's talk about that first. Okay, let's talk about the McDermitt Caldera. Okay, if you've driven from Boise to Winnemucca, you've gone through McDermitt. They're right in the state line between Oregon and Nevada. Okay, well, just to the west, is this keyhole shape, what's called a keyhole shaped caldera. It turns out it was sort of, there was volcanism and all kinds of geological processes that resulted in these lithium deposits and uranium and mercury deposits happening there. And this was like sort of the place where the Yellowstone hotspot originated, and then it sort of is where it is now. Yeah, because of the movement of the earth plates, whatever. But anyway, and in the past there'd been mercury mining, but these are small scale mines. They were highly toxic, and they're still polluting.
I can imagine.
They're still polluting there. In the McDermitt caldera, absolutely nothing like what the lithium boom is and will do to the area, and also some very small, like uranium prospects. Okay, but now we have lithium. We have USGS this spring going out, helicopter with all kinds of fancy sensing gear slung under it in a big hoop, looking for water and looking for, critical minerals all over the landscape there. It's in the crosshairs of just development of all kinds. But the Thacker Pass is, the whole project started during the Trump administration, and it was streamlined. It moved really fast. And NEPA is our National Environmental Policy Act, where we're supposed to be able to look before we leap. It doesn't determine an outcome. Bad things can happen, but you're supposed to minimize, mitigate, whatever. But you're supposed to look thoroughly at the environmental impact so you can understand what can be done, to maybe not make it as bad. Okay, well, usually in these streamlined processes, they go too fast to really... In this instance, it wasn't just streamlined, it was streamlined during the peak of COVID, okay? And you could not go down to a BLM office and talk to a person. The doors bolted shut, etc. So it was like pushed through really fast. Wow. And there were lots and lots of loose ends. And one of the things we'll talk about that loops back to where we are here in Boise, tangentially sort of, is the tribal consultation that occurred. And the federal government, BLM, when it conducts a project on public lands, it's going to have significant impacts. It's supposed to engage in government to government consultation with tribal interests. And in this case, the tribes feel very strongly that did not happen. Yeah. And that a lot of things were covered up, and those things came out in the course of the litigation over Thacker Pass. So
people, like you said, people have filed suits.
Oh yeah. Let's go back.
A number of different because they see. It sounds like they see, like the tribes do, that it wasn't done fairly, it wasn't done properly by procedure. Is that what you're saying? Why these lawsuits are coming in now?
Yeah. Okay. So, there were 3 separate lawsuits filed initially over the Thacker Pass mine. One was an environmental group lawsuit, and that involved Great Basin Resource Watch, who those folks have long worked on mining in the Great Basin, which is a tough thing to do because Nevada is like dominated, run by the mines. And then Western Watersheds Project has long worked on public lands issues, and then Wildlands Defense, the organization I'm with, and then the Great Basin Resource Watch, and those folks have been dealing with the green energy solar development boom in the Mojave Desert.
And I want to have you touch on that here in a moment.
Yeah.
So you're saying this
so there were 4 separate groups.
There's been working a long time in this arena. These groups have trying to fight them.
Since it's been, I think, 3 years now since the initial lawsuits were filed. 2021. Okay. 2 or 3 years. It's all a blur because
it's moving so fast.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the environmental plaintiffs against the Thacker Pass mine, and then there were 2 tribal groups that that have filed a lawsuit, and that was the Reno Sparks Indian Colony and the Burns Paiute tribe, and that that was over, the inadequacy of consultation and, the failure to properly consult with tribal interests. And also there's a cattle rancher, Edward Bartell, who's filed a separate lawsuit too over the impacts to water.
Okay.
And something, now if you've driven through McDermitt, this country looks mighty dry.
You need water's critically important, right?
Yeah, and actually the Thacker Pass mine is 30 miles south of McDermitt, west of Orovada. But because people probably remember McDermitt more, and the McDermitt Caldera, it takes up the whole area there to the west.
Okay.
From Thacker Pass at the south up to a bit north of McDermitt, but west of the main highway, Highway 95. But yeah, very little water. The groundwater is already, this is what the Quinn River Basin is already over allocated. I just, in commenting on a water right, actually in Oregon just this past week, talked to folks about what are the water levels in the Quinn Basin in Nevada. Of course, that's a whole nother thing. Oregon manages its water one way, Nevada manages its water.
Different states do. Okay.
But I mean, if you're looking, it's like, I asked Oregon in this process, so do you ever consider like it's over allocated just downstream and what, since water doesn't respect state law?
Right.
Well, I don't know if we do.
Yeah, right. Everybody kind of lives in
their own little bubble. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so there's like $90,000 acre feet of groundwater appropriated annually in the Quinn Basin in Nevada. There's like 60,000 acre feet of yield that comes in. So that means
30,000. Okay, so the difference is 30,000.
Yeah, that means we're depleting the aquifer.
Oh, okay. So 60,000 replenishes it. 90 takes away. So we're
going down.
Every year.
Okay, so that's the overall picture. Okay, that's the overall.
What's taking the water? Is it a number of things? The farming.
There's irrigated agriculture there. There's
So
there's
they've
not
kind of we've over
allocated. It's a story in Idaho. It's the story everywhere in the West. It's the story in the Colorado River Basin. If you're following that whole saga.
Well, I know. What I more follow is what I know. Arizona and California are in a mess because they're out of water, right?
Yeah.
So is it similar? It's a similar process.
It's a similar
using
thing.
Too much resources.
Yeah, and it's just we don't know. We don't know when to say stop. We don't know when to say we're breaking things. It's like this whole. It's the frontier mentality, and it's and the frontier mentality is reinforced by the very strong political pressures from politicians. If you try to stop someone from doing new development in the landscape, in this very fragile landscape. The other thing with a mega mine, they use a whole lot of water, a tremendous amount of water, for dust suppression. Okay, because you got to keep down the dust, otherwise it's just. And these lithium soils are like the dustiest on Earth, almost. I mean, it's just, And also, think of this: you have this sort of broad, almost pass-like area. Then you have this, the Montana Mountains is what they're called, even though they aren't in Montana, but they're called the Montana Mountains. Rising up, and there's some springs there in the Montana Mountains. Okay, well, the underground water and the whole system of the springs, if you start digging a deep pit down through the water column, then you start draining some of those springs. Then you start drying them up. So let's loop back to sage grouse. Okay, sage grouse are they encapsulate all the harmful impacts like something like the Thacker Pass mine would have, because they don't just sit like in an acre of land. They don't just hang out, on the side of the lake, year round.
They're moving. So you're saying they're moving around?
They're moving around, yeah. And so what they need, with the different seasons, they need different things, and they need the ability to move around in a relatively unfragmented, undisturbed habitat. So they're relatively low elevation sagebrush communities, openings in them is where the leks are located. A lot of the sage grouse hen nesting occurs like in proximity to the leks, within say 4 miles of the leks, and that's a big area, okay? And then what do the chicks do? Okay, the chicks, they aren't like robin chicks sitting in the nest, chirping away. As soon as they hatch, they can move around. They're like little,
So they have them so they're not like in nests, they're on the ground.
Well, they nest. They nest. The sage, and this, I skipped that.
But they don't like kind of
Yeah,
like
they have to immediately start eating insects. Like
so their mom doesn't go get the thing and bring it back to them.
That's right. That's right.
So they're wild creatures. You survive,
you survive, and you're a very tasty little morsel for lots of things.
You gotta learn real quick. Kind of like reminds me of those little sea turtles when they're born. They got to get going.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And they go around with mom, and sometimes the broods get combined, whatever. But they need to start eating insects. Well, what produces insects in the sagebrush country? It's the flowers. Lots of insects are associated with the flowers, not many insects are associated with the grasses. So you need the diversity of the native wildflowers there. Yeah. Okay, so then they're growing, they've eaten their insects, they get a little bigger, things are really drying out, because at the same time as the chicks are growing, it's getting drier and drier, And so what do? They go to meadows, mesic areas, springs and seeps, and riparian areas that are not surrounded by steep hill slopes, because you'll be able to see around to see when the golden eagle's coming to get them, and you want a wide open landscape to be able to see that. So they need the springs and the wet areas that things like digging a deep mine pit harm.
Would destroy.
Okay, and then meanwhile, like the males are very tired and wasted away, lose a lot of weight from all that showing off in the lek for months on end. They're sort of up in, relatively higher elevations, a lot of the time, typically, okay? There's variations between sage grouse populations, etc. But then in fall, they start focusing, all the sage grouse start eating sagebrush, and they must have sagebrush to survive. And then in the winter, that's all they eat. And in hard winters, where there's a bunch of snow, they need relatively dense sagebrush that sticks up enough above the snow.
Okay, right. So
to be able to access. They can also subsist on like windswept low sagebrush. But back to the McDermitt caldera, what's happened to this landscape? There have been a series of major fires, and now the lithium mining is going into the areas where there's still sagebrush left.
So they're not really going in where the fires were per se. They're doing other places and destroying.
Yeah, I mean,
a little bit.
Yeah, generally, yeah. Thacker Pass is taking out some of the Thacker Pass area is burnt in the past. Some of it was purposely destroyed by BLM in the past too. With seeding for livestock forage and treatments.
So it sounds like it's taken a number of hits that this ecosystem has been.
Exactly. So now.
So it's like it's not necessarily like one thing. It sounds like it's like a number of things, and one will be the straw that broke the camel's back, kind of a thing.
Yes, and that's exactly how sage grouse biologists have described what's happening to sagebrush and sage grouse: death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
And you keep cutting and cutting away, and especially when you have a bird that has these, has to move across the landscape and needs these,
different areas,
things
that are happening.
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm almost getting vibes like canary in the coal mine kind of a thing.
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure. Yes, that's for sure. And people have described sage grouse that way. And what is the West and all the big valleys in the West and everything, the surrounding areas, if you don't have sagebrush? That's sort of what holds the landscape together. It's also where the antelope and deer go in the winter. They are like it's a complex thing, isn't it? Yes, it is. It is, and as goes sage grouse.
So because when we're talking the other day, we were talking a lot about that's I love that. That's great information. So what do you know? Because we talked about the lithium mine, and we talked about the greenwashing, and we talked about some of the other things. And I've heard there's lithium mining going on all around the world, and corporations are going in and just taking whatever they want from these, poorer countries, third world countries. What do you know about? Tell me what you know about that and what's going to happen out there potentially with the lithium mines there in Idaho, or in the West.
In the West, okay. Well, the U.S. has long exploited other countries for minerals, bananas,
whatever Americans want, we'll get it for you. Right?
Yes. Okay. And South America, right now, I'm sorry, my
You're
dog.
good. It's a little scratch.
Anyway, there's now like turmoil and unrest. What are you doing?
Like, I want to be part of this show, huh?
Yes. I didn't know you climbed up on picnic table. Sky, do you have anything to say? Sky has been out there. He's been observing the destruction of the sagebrush.
Has Sky been on scene?
Sky has been on scene. He's very helpful.
Is he?
He's very helpful.
He looks helpful. Helping you out there. Take
Yeah.
care.
Anyway, yeah. And there's a couple different methods of lithium mining. One is sort of this basic hard rock mining. The other is this brine process that, I don't know if you're allowed on top of a picnic table on state of Idaho property.
He's like, I'll get down.
Oh, come on. Anyway, where was I? Well, there was just an article about the unrest in Peru. The U.S. has 1,000 troops there now.
You were mentioning something about that, so, and I need to look into that. Yeah. So there's,
yeah, but like Bolivia, has long been contentious because it's always the same. It's always the huge corporate interest, and no matter, like here in the U.S., who are these companies? They are often Canadian, or there have been Chinese, I'm talking about mining in general, Chinese, Korean, whatever. Who are they really? And they'll spin off, and that's what's happened with lithium mining. They'll spin off this, like Lithium Americas at Thacker Pass has spun off this Lithium Nevada Corporation or whatever to get in line for huge federal subsidies to destroy the sagebrush habitat and, sacred cultural sites. So we are subsidizing this corporate destruction of our public lands and of what is essentially privatization of the public lands for 45 years, which is what they expect this mine to be in this extremely arid, fragile landscape. And I was with sage grouse. I didn't even tell you, we started talking about it a little bit, but the efforts to not list sage grouse under the Endangered Species Act, because then we'd have to behave better and treat the land better. Okay, well, 2015, Obama administration, huge push to develop these sage grouse plans in order to avoid sage grouse listing. And the Interior Department, Sally Jewell was Interior Secretary at the time, consists of both Fish and Wildlife Service and BLM. So it's not like they're, there's not like one is going to have much of a...
So this person is over both of those?
Over both of them. Okay. So developing these huge plans. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Mighty promises to save sage grouse. Part of the plans that came in late was we're going to do federal mineral withdrawals. The Interior Secretary has always had the power to basically withdraw areas of federal lands from mining for like 20 years or for a period of time. That Interior, to ensure the persistence of sage grouse, one of the main things they promised was they would withdraw the land for sage grouse. Well, nearly all the McDermitt Caldera was supposed to be withdrawn from mineral entry to save sage grouse. The Thacker Pass mine, and I think this lithium mining, there were already claims out there, and had been some digging around for clay. The line was drawn just to exclude, the southern end of what was called focal habitat, comes up basically to the northern edge of the Thacker Pass mine. Okay. But the Thacker Pass mine's footprint won't just be where the mine is; it will be, the Lex.
So have a bigger, broader impact.
Broader impact, yeah.
Okay.
It's not just where the earth is, physically disturbed. It's the noise. It's the sensitivity of the birds to disturbance. It's the impacts to the watershed. It's the who knows what the impacts will be of processing lithium out in the middle of nowhere in this area of clean air. We're going to be also polluting clean air,
Right.
because they're going to be hauling in hundreds of truckloads a day of waste sulfur offloaded at a railhead in Winnemucca, which came as a surprise to the neighbors when they found out.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Hey, by the way, you might want to wear a mask every day, right? Well, and that's one of the things that, from what little I've seen about lithium mining, is that it's extremely, like, you've got to dig a lot of dirt.
Yes.
And you got to disrupt a lot of things, and you got to haul it and process it like that. Is that what you're finding too? Is that it's very laborsome and it's very just destructive?
Oh, it's hard rock. Yes, it's just like, hard.
I guess any mining, maybe any mining might be like
the
that.
Hard rock mining, yeah, but trying to, what was that old expression? Put lipstick on a pig.
Of course.
I must say. I mean, that's what it is, and that's what greenwashing is.
Right.
And they were going to, Lithium Americas, we're coming in. We're going to be this great.
You can all drive electric cars, and behind the scenes, there's just that's what I'm finding is there's just a wave of destruction. I know that I don't remember whether it's South America or I know they're doing it in Africa, but I think in South America too, they've got their eyes on these Amazon rainforests, and they're like, there's a lot of good stuff in there, and we're just going to take it.
Yeah, and people had thought
they've been doing that for decades with the cattle famine.
And there was always the undercurrent of like Afghanistan, all the critical, the rare earth minerals there, and you just see, conflicts.
Yeah, well, I gave up on, I finally came to my senses and realized, the U.S. isn't going into these countries to spread democracy and freedom. Right. They're going there because they want stuff from them.
There's some, strategic.
Either location or some, like resources or something.
Yes, exactly. And now we're in this great competition with China, whatever. Yet everything we buy is made in China.
Yeah, right.
Insane.
Well, and it's all spin and propaganda. And I realized this. I was listening to, military people from decades ago, almost like 50, 60 years ago, even middle of the century, saying, we got tired of going in to Central America or South, securing the place so that corporations could come in and do the thing.
That's what we're doing now. That's what we're doing.
So it's nothing new under the sun.
Now we're doing it like for lithium, in South America.
It's just a different, maybe it's for this or this corporation or this industry or whatever. So it's a similar, same rinse and repeat kind of a thing.
Yeah, green colonialism. Yeah.
Wow.
It's the same. It's the empire. It's like, and, now we're doing this to our Western public lands very fast, and excusing it away as part of the green energy transition. And the green energy transition is going to wreak total havoc on Western public lands, including with this whole industrial solar, huge wind farms,
Tell me what you know about that, because we were talking about that the other day, and for people that maybe don't know, what do you know about the ecological damage and or the viability of solar and wind?
Well, I am not like, a physicist detailed person. What I do know is about the land areas and the wildlife, and the habitat, and what stands to get wrecked. And there's some of our, again, last best places, because right now there's a frenzy to build these transmission lines for the grid, for basically industrial solar and industrial wind to be built on public lands, and all the energy shipped off to the cities. Shipped off to coastal populations or Las Vegas or wherever. It's just the same old total exploitation mentality, green colonialism based on our public lands, that we should sacrifice them rather than we embark on a path of conservation, rooftop solar, local distributed energy, all that stuff, that we've been talking about for years and years. Instead, we're going in the opposite direction. California just now is sort of trying to back off some of the rooftop solar.
Oh, or are they trying to go to, so that they were pushing for it, and now they're trying to
think about it. Energy in the hands of billionaires and corporations. That's what this is all is facilitating. That's what it's all facilitating, And now we haven't talked if we go back to lithium mining, we haven't talked about the mining law of 1872. Okay.
What's that?
That is how mining happens on public lands, okay? Okay, that was from the pick and shovel era. When had a shovel, and a pick, and the miners were going out, hitting gold in California,
kind of like, what are they,
Virginia
prospecting?
City, you name it, Idaho City, okay? That basically, says, you can have access to valuable mineral deposits, and mine away. Well, pick and shovel mining was a bit different than like having a house-sized piece of heavy equipment, soon to be powered by a robot and not a person, as the jobs melt away in mega mining.
So are you saying that the laws really haven't been updated to account for the destruction, higher destruction?
Western politicians have often stood in the way because of the power of mines and the financial influence of often foreign mines, exploiting.
That's what I mean, it's bad enough if your own country does it, but it's even worse. It's kind of an extra, salt in the wound when another foreign country comes in and exploits your resources.
Many mines in the West. That's what is really there. There's this
foreign interest,
Canadian mines, like we were talking about. Now, in the McDermitt Caldera, now we have the Jindalee Australian miners. Of course, they too have spun off the U.S.,
I mean, I guess to that point, the thought that's coming to my mind is like, okay, karma for centuries or decades, we have done that to other countries.
Yeah.
It's
and the West is the
sage grouse has come home to roost, so to speak, right?
The sage grouse, exactly. But we're sold the myth, and we're sold the propaganda, like from the, from the extractive interest, be it oil and gas mining, the Interior Department, that this is all good. We're doing it in a sound manner. It's all sustainable. No.
And meanwhile, the destruction is fast and
is just cumulative, adding up. And now the lithium mining is poised to take out, as I said, some of the last best places left. And in fact, that's what that focal habitat that identified almost the entire McDermitt Caldera with those 2015 sage grouse plans, that's what that was all about, is that this is the most important habitat for sage grouse. We must protect it from mining. That never happened. First because of litigation, then because of, then it moved forward, and then Trump withdrew it. And then it started again because of litigation, and now it's all being bundled into this blob of, we're going to amend the sage grouse plans. Meanwhile, we have, since 2015 to now, how many years of no mineral withdrawal? All these claims have been staked, and then having the claims staked, the miners can claim, we have this pre-existing interest out there.
It kind of negates the fact that the federal government did do studies that showed, hey, we were going to protect this area.
The federal government, and basically promised in the sage grouse plans to prevent Endangered Species Act listing of sage grouse in 2015 that these mineral withdrawals would happen and these lands would be secured from mining. Mm-hmm. Now, boom, in comes...
They're kind of going back on their word, is that what you're saying?
Yes, broken promises.
Once that money will make them do that.
Yeah, exactly. Money and delusions of sustainability, and I've actually come to think of some of this as almost like this green energy cult that
I've heard that
doesn't. It's just anything goes as long as you brand it a certain way.
Yeah.
That there's no thought about the impacts to biodiversity, to what's really going to happen to a place. Including if you're looking at the future, after you hollow out an area, what's going to happen after the mines leave, or after all the jobs go to robots?
Like what real benefit will that bring to the area or to the people or whatever? Like you said,
and we, water, dust, pollution, because there's basically going to be a lithium smelter of some kind. I call it a smelter. I don't understand.
So they'll have to process it to a degree out there
at Thacker Pass. Polluting the air.
Sure.
Downwinders, going to be McDermitt, going to be the Fort McDermitt Reservation. Some of it will get over to Duck Valley, because that's, even though it would take 5 hours to drive between Duck Valley, it's a shorter distance right across the sagebrush where there's no good roads at all to get you there. And then some of it will get to Boise. And at the time the Thacker Pass mine was approved, the emissions control device wasn't finalized. So here, that's part of like the streamlining, rushing things through, and not looking before you leave, and not thinking things out. Oh, it'll all work out in the end.
It's the typical government protocol. It's like, when are you going to learn?
Yeah. So here we have this project, Thacker Pass Rush, during the Trump administration. It was like January, right before the change of administrations. In comes the Biden administration. Appoints a Native American as Interior Secretary. Things are going to get better. Well, things didn't. There was no re-looking, at least at any aspect of Thacker Pass. It's been totally hands off.
They just picked up
and then there's a quote. I think it was in either AP or the Washington Post. Deb Haaland got asked about it. Well, that was approved before me. And anyway, we need green energy. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially it was something like that.
What they did is, I'm on board with what they were doing.
Exactly.
We're going to continue.
And that's the way so many things have happened on public lands. Plus, what has gotten much worse is this total green energy cult that we can destroy any place, anywhere. We can bulldoze off the Mojave Desert. We can put wind turbines anywhere. It doesn't matter because we're on our green energy crusade. It's like, wait a minute. Do you want a world worth living in the end?
Yeah.
There's other aspects other than what you're saying is what you're talking about doing to solve this climate crisis is further industrialization and centralization of energy. Is that really
it's almost like the end justifies any means
as long as there's money involved. Yeah.
It's heartbreaking, and that's what I really wanted you to share is like what's going on behind the scenes. Well, so what do you think? So let's talk about like solutions. What can people do once they do know? Hey, because clearly what I'm seeing is like it's never going to change from the top down. It seems like it's got to change from the bottom up. What can an everyday average person take this knowledge and apply it in their own life to be a part of the solution and not part of the problem?
Well,
I know that's a big question,
but we started talking about
some brainstorming. Because my big thing is knowledge is power and information is what we need. And we, like you say, we're getting a lot of propaganda from those corporations and or the government that says, hey, like you said, if it's green, it's good. No matter how it got there, just use it and do it. Yeah. That's why I know that when people are empowered and they understand, they'll be able to vote with their money, because I think that's a big factor.
Yeah. Well, part of it is basically we need better media. We need some way, and the internet helps some, but here in Idaho, there's no central, the reporting on environmental issues is appallingly superficial and minimal. The Thacker Pass mine, that was reported on in Nevada, and there's been some articles in national papers. But, look at all the people in Boise that, this is sort of part of their broader landscape. Every time you drive back and forth to California or down into Nevada, you go through this landscape and people don't know anything about it. We somehow have to, get the word out that these are big issues, and it's not just this lithium mine here. There's many more coming, and it isn't just a lithium mining. It's how what we're actually doing to public lands and some of the most biodiverse, most important places left for wildlife, and clean air and everything in the West, dark skies, you name it. We're going to have now polluting lights in this.
Yeah.
It's just all this stuff. It's just like, and it's really reminiscent of like, I haven't worked in Wyoming at all, but just, reading the articles.
Of what happened there with the oil?
With the oil and gas. Boom. Same thing. 1872 mining law, federal agency says, our hands are tied. We can't. Okay, well, let's go back to Thacker Pass, but let's go back to a year or two before Thacker Pass. A mine in Arizona, Rosemont Mine. I think it was a copper mine. But anyway, environmental litigation over the Rosemont Mine set a legal precedent, because we have our precious 1872 mining law that politicians, Western politicians of all kinds, including Harry Reid, he was when he was Senate Majority Leader, huge roadblock to any mining reform. And now his banner is carried forward by Catherine Cortez Masto, another Democrat, and we'll talk about that hopefully briefly. Anyway, what was I starting to say?
Well, you were talking about something about Rosemont, Arizona.
Oh yeah, Rosemont. Yeah, I got digression on how it's just been blocked. Okay, Rosemont Mine. So there was a great legal precedent set there. So even though the mining law of 1872 says, you can mine anywhere, anyhow, for like valuable minerals. Well, in the Rosemont Mine, this was Forest Service land, the mining company hadn't proven that where they wanted to put all their waste rock from their huge mine pit actually had minerals. So the environmentalists won on the basis that, on the basis of the 1870 mine law saying you had to have, valuable minerals and prove it.
Oh, so environmentalists won that.
Won that, okay. And that was, Western Mining Action. Roger Flynn was an attorney there. And there was at least one other attorney. Won that, yes. And that was, of course, appealed by the mining industry to the Ninth Circuit, and then the full Ninth Circuit, upheld the decision. So that's setting a new, legal precedent, at least in...
Sounds like a good thing.
A good thing, yeah. Like, hey, okay, let's at least have some accountability that the mining company doesn't get more public land by not, to put their waste rock on, without,
that's good.
showing there's valuable minerals there, because that's what the 1872 mining law says, essentially. Well, then the Thacker Pass ruling came down, at the district court level. It's still under appeal at the Ninth Circuit. Okay. And basically, the judge embraced the Rosemont decision, but didn't stop the mining. And this is sort of unheard of in environmental circles.
So this is a new twist, huh?
A new twist. But then subsequently, another mine in Nevada, a molybdenum mine, the judge used the Rosemont decision to say, hey, there's no water here, and the mine hasn't, because water, huge issue there too. And the mine didn't show that there was actually locatable minerals here, valuable minerals. Okay. Well, okay. So then we have 3 decisions now. So what do our precious politicians do? Catherine Cortez Masto, Democratic senator in Nevada, working with Jim Risch and Mike Crapo, introduced this legislation that basically makes the 1872 mining law worse. As someone said, the 1871 mining law essentially would say, it doesn't matter, you don't have to have locatable minerals.
Okay, so
valuable
because
minerals.
They're finding this as a potential problem for these
corporations. So then they're saying you don't have to have show in advance you have it. Yes. They have a different name for it. Yeah, it's like, holy cow! This is this one little chink of maybe some small degree of mining industry accountability before they rape and plunder, and haul their fortunes off to foreign shores.
Of course.
And I didn't mention that Lithium Americas, there's a major Chinese Ganfeng interest in Lithium Americas, sort of the parent company of Lithium Nevada.
Well, so, China does have all the money,
we're going to save the war, we're going to do our own microchip, battle. It's just like, well, no. And hey, if you're into green energy and you're into the climate crisis, you need to work together to stop all this warring madness.
Yeah, that creates a whole bunch of
and pollution and everything else.
Yeah.
And okay.
That's the duplicity. That's what I always say. It's just so crazy. You look at the government and we want to help you be green. We're going to send our war machine overseas and destroy that place.
Exactly. And we were talking about the Will Ferrell, GM greenwashing Super Bowl ad, and the new report done by folks that have long worked on mining interests in a group of traditional Native Americans affected by Thacker Pass and would be affected by the Jindalee mining too, on GM greenwashing, because not only did the U.S. government, give a huge slug of Lithium Nevada is lined up for $600 million of federal loans to develop the mine. GM threw in $650 million or so
of their own money.
Supposedly, but who knows where?
Right, who knows where they got it? They could have got it from the government.
Was it really coming? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But anyway, you look at what this is for batteries, battery plants, whatever, and you think, well, what else does GM do besides build big pickup trucks, etc.? Yeah. And stop building their own, low end
low
EV
emission
cars.
EV,
yeah. They also build military vehicles.
Of course, it's
and
all
then
connected.
Actually, you go to their website, and there is, you can GM something LLC. These, big
the Humvee type thing.
Yeah, but son of Humvees, essentially.
Yeah.
Essentially, So it's just all tied together, and then we haven't really talked about the Jindalee mining operation. That would go into 100% sage grouse focal habitat. It would just destroy this area, arc by Lex, in the McDermitt Creek watershed, just across the line from Nevada, in the McDermitt Caldera in Oregon. Western Rivers Conservancy is they purchase lands for conservation purposes. Had bought what was called the Zimmerman Ranch there. It was private land in order to restore the habitat for Lahontan cutthroat trout. Okay, the whole huge Jindalee mine claims are all over to the north and even extend south of the Western Rivers, private land that was supposed to, and the surrounding watersheds are supposed to be restored too for Lahontan cutthroat trout recovery. But it just so happens to be just, incredibly important for sage grouse too.
Of course. but
for migratory birds, yeah. And
and they're finding these minerals there too now.
Lithium, yeah, and it was the same thing. Open pit strip mine, lower grade than Thacker Pass, or whatever, And it's just plus there you'd have to build this 10 miles at least of huge new access road. There's a county gravel road going in, but to get huge mine equipment, and then you'd have the whole noise footprint, like we talked about with sage grouse, oil and gas in Wyoming, disturbing all the wildlife, the antelope, the mule deer, the songbirds, everything else, and it's just sickening what is happening.
Well, and I think what I'm picking up on this, and what little I know about it too, it's exactly like you said. We're going to this destination by be damned. Whatever we're gonna get to this EV.
Ends justify the means.
Yeah, it's just wild.
And the public land. We have this myth of protecting public lands, of saving sage grouse. They love to say
until there's enough money thrown on the table,
and then all of a sudden, poof!
Just go and do it.
Yeah, just go and do it.
Well, I like what you said about the media, and I do believe, because I believe that whatever problem humanity is facing, once good people know that these are the facts, they become part of the solution. Because a lot of times, hey, as a person who doesn't want to peel beneath the scenes, electric car, green energy, good. They don't. But if you peel behind the scenes and see the destruction to get there,
yeah.
I think people will start buying less electric cars. I know I would. I'd be like, I'm not going to go there.
But the other thing is all this money being thrown at Thacker Pass, Jindalee trying to line itself up for God knows how much. That should be put into research for other battery technologies. The Chinese are already working on other types of batteries.
More ecological, more
using
environmental.
sodium or other not as scarce, minerals. So
there's other
it's just
things you can do to still be green. But
should we be blading off the Mojave Desert for industrial? Some of the ironwood trees and yucca, ancient yuccas and things like that, so we can power a strip mall in wherever that doesn't have solar panels on its roof. I don't think so, or whatever,
Yeah.
And it's just this endless consumption. We're being fed the myth that with green energy we can continue our endless consumption.
That's a good point.
That's what it's all about. And then you go back to the money.
Mm-hmm. And the corporations align themselves with that and get in on the exploitation.
Yeah. And you have all these think tanks and everything else, helping gin up propaganda and support. It was just at a BLM Resource Advisory meeting in McDermitt. Vail BLM, that's another crazy thing. Vail BLM manages the Oregon lands down there, 4 hours or so away from the mothership office. Anyway, in McDermitt, and it focused on the lithium mining. And what does the BLM geologist do? But he shows this Atlantic Council video as part of his presentation. And the Atlantic Council, they're these incurable warmongering think tank, and there's critical minerals. And these people who look like they've never touched a shovel in their lives are talking about, we need to get shovels in the ground.
Like ASAP, right?
Yeah, and what I took that to mean is we need shovels for warmongering, essentially.
Because you know the history, what they're
about. What they're really about. Yeah, they've never seen a war they didn't want to go all in on. Just like, GM and their hat all in on, or whatever it is, everyone in, or whatever their slogan is.
New EV slogan.
Meanwhile, they're building huge hulks of EVs, and
it's crazy. Well, Katie, I think this is super valuable knowledge. Go ahead.
So, should we talk a little bit about why we're here? Okay. Now, this is my, my observations. I'm not an indigenous.
Well, that's why I wanted you to come on here, because your boots on the ground out there, seeing what's happening, and I think it's important to share this with the public.
Yeah. Okay.
Your experience.
Okay. So, anyway. Thacker Pass, a huge part of Thacker Pass, a huge part of Thacker Pass in the tribal opposition has been that this was a very sacred site. This whole landscape in the McDermitt Caldera.
To Native Americans out there.
Native Americans. Why? There have been 2 massacres there. One was an intertribal massacre, Pit tribe, I believe it was, and that's where the name Pahimuhu, which is, what the Native Americans, the Paiutes, call the Thacker Pass area, came from. And then there was a cavalry, 1860s cavalry massacre there. Okay, none of this was brought out in BLM's NEPA environmental analysis.
They just glossed over that.
They didn't even. This wasn't even mentioned. Plus, there's like Sentinel Rock or Nipple Rock. I mean, you just, as a white person, just, looking at these landscapes, you could tell that place has significance. It has to, just the shape of it. It's not a big one, but you just,
there's something.
It sort of ground,
about
and it sort of grounds the whole area, anchors the whole area, and you can tell it's important. None of this is in, the environmental analysis, and BLM claims it, but it basically didn't know any of this. Well, maybe if it would have consulted with the tribes and notified the tribes, and you have to understand what was going on during COVID when this was all coming down. The tribes were shut down, man.
Sure.
Because
it's not a time to do important work like that.
Who's probably most vulnerable to this latest disease scourge after having this, been decimated in the past by all these diseases? So everybody's scared because no one knows what, So anyway, but BLM, man, project signed in the Trump administration, fought for fiercely under the Biden administration to go forward, in total denial of this. And then in the process of the litigation, out comes, by the way, BLM, you do know about this. Your own Interior Department, Interior Department surveyor, land office records talk about, massacre, about skulls being scattered.
So their excuse of we didn't know didn't fly. I mean, they knew.
It didn't fly, and this came out in the course of the litigation, as well as the Oxam. Okay, who is Oxam? Okay, Oxam was a survivor of the cavalry massacre that took place in the Thacker Pass area. There were only 3 survivors. And the what happened is the cavalry fired into tents, just basically, wiped out as many people as they could. There's an OPB article that has some of the quotes about just the attitude, really horrific attitude.
And what year did this take place? This massacre?
I think
1860s. You said?
I think 1860s.
So this gentleman Oxam
escaped.
Was he a
He was one of the 3 tribal members who escaped.
Wow.
Okay.
So he went and told people about it, huh?
Well, yes.
At least was a trace back to.
Yes. And one of the people he told was somebody who Big Bill Haywood knew, and Big Bill Haywood also, had talked with Oxam. And Big Bill Haywood was a labor organizer, in the early 1900s. And there was tremendous strife and exploitation of workers and horrendous working conditions in the mines in the West at that time.
I can imagine.
You know, in northern Idaho, the silver mines, in Colorado, etc. And so, of course, the powers that be hated Big Bill Haywood.
Oh, sure, right.
The government hated Big Bill Haywood. And it was a bloody time, you know. And Haywood, you know, advocated violence, too, and, you know, or direct action, whatever. And, you know, violent.
Yeah, whatever it took, kind of a Malcolm X kind of
whatever
a
it
thing.
took, yeah. There was a bombing that killed the governor of Idaho, Steunenberg.
Okay, you told me about that.
Okay, yeah. And I'm not a historian, but, you know,
Right.
and don't remember all the specific details.
Right.
Okay, but Big Bill Haywood and some other mining activists were extradited and or kidnapped. It depends on who you talk to, from Colorado, brought to Idaho, and put on trial for the murder
Of this
of the
gentleman.
Idaho governor. Yeah, and Clarence Darrow ended up defending Big Bill Haywood and some of the other people that were put on trial, and that trial took place right here in what's called the Bora Building here in Boise, Idaho, and it was called the trial of the century at the time because it involved.
What year this was happening? 1920s?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm terrible with remembering.
That's okay.
exact
I can find
years.
it and put it in
Okay.
the description.
Yeah.
So the trial of the century.
Yeah, right here in Boise, Idaho, in this building behind us, Big Bill Haywood. Well, one of the other sources, and Big Bill Haywood got off. He won, yeah. Bora, where recently a huge statue that sort of just exudes kind of toxic masculinity, at least in my eyes,
Yes.
appeared out here in front of the Bora building around 3 years ago, surrounded by concrete galore. Anyway, there's a big statue now, larger than life. And everyone I believe.
Was he the DA that was prosecuting?
Yeah, he was prosecuting Big Bill Haywood. In my mind, Big Bill Haywood's statue should be out there.
Yeah, it would make sense, yeah, wouldn't it?
It's almost giving Bora this larger than life statue is almost like trying to diminish, just try to drape him,
Yeah, good point.
But anyway, so what came out as part of the Thacker Pass litigation from the tribal interests was that, hey, the autobiography of Big Bill Haywood talked about Oxam and Oxam's, account of the massacre.
Yeah.
Here. And this to me, it's like, okay, this should be like, oh my God, in the middle of the trial, the new DNA evidence comes in and they get off. But oh no, that's not the way BLM operates.
No, I mean,
No, it's just, oh no, just dig your heels in deeper and say, oh, well, back in 2005, the Burns Paiute tribe said they weren't interested in hearing about the RMP from the little notice we sent them.
Yeah.
So now they don't care about.
Well, and then they're going to, once the government says, they're going to find something, to send the team out, find something that we can make this move forward with. This kind of seems like what they do.
Yes, that's what they do, yeah. And I don't know the details at all, but just a recent Supreme Court case was in the news about Navajo water rights.
Was it?
The Navajos, signed this treaty with the government. The government, it was basically sort of the great white father mentality. It would provide for them, for to be able to live on the land, okay? Well, you need water to live in the desert.
Sure.
So, with the whole Colorado water rights situation, everything. Well, the Supreme Court just ruled that, well, the federal government doesn't really have to figure out how to give Navajos water rights. But it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there was a treaty. Here, this is all unceded land we're talking about in the McDermitt Caldera, where there was never any treaty. The tribal interests never gave it up.
Wow. It's fascinating. I mean, you could go on and on, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Anything else on your mind you want to share? You've given it such a great information, and I think people are going to learn a lot about it from it.
Well, I just think, this truly, it's like there are so much that's involved with what is going on right now with the lithium mining, with the green energy boom, essentially. And not accepting what you're first told about it, but digging underneath the surface and trying to figure out what's really going on, what's really at stake, and are we just repeating the very same mistakes we made in the past of basically frontier mentality, manifest destiny, conquer it all, reduce it for our use, so we can continue on just with consuming the same way we always have been.
That's a fantastic closure right there. I love that. Katie, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I'm so glad you're interested in this. And
absolutely. It's important. We only have one environment, one earth. And I see whether it's different species becoming extinct, and whether it's like overfishing in the, what is it, the South China Sea. I know the tuna fish. We're just depleting. And what really hurts my heart is when you see like the poachers of the rhinoceros or the elephant for the tusk.
God.
It's just heartbreaking what human beings and I don't. The way I look at it is that it's everything's connected. Whether it's economy, like those poachers and people, they're just trying to survive, right? If there was a better way for them to live, they would do it. They don't want to kill the rhinoceros, but and some of them are in it for the money. Let's be honest, But a lot of it's just ignorance or the need to survive.
And the money is always is almost always foreign influence. It's like and it's for ego. It's
and then they may have mansions and billions of dollars, but at what cost do you get that? If you destroy ecosystems and habitats and animal species, what's the point for future generations?
Yeah. That's what we're seeing, and it's all cloaked in sustainability terms now. What this new assault on the West that's so similar to the oil and gas boom in Wyoming, where it just went forward and has destroyed
like
so much.
The same scenario, different plan, different propaganda.
And it's taken out now sort of the last undeveloped country. That we have, basically in the sagebrush landscape. It's really tragic, and it's just so full of misinformation and propaganda.
That's what bothers me. Like I said, I'm a big fan of if people have the right information, they're going to make the right decisions. But when you get the media machine and the government machine and the corporation machine spinning it in such a way, then people on the ground, I think people want to do the right thing. They realize that, hey, if I'm going to preserve this for my future generations, I can't destroy it. But when you get fed propaganda, you can't do the right thing because you don't know the right thing.
And an example of this is down there in McDermitt. There are billboards that have been put up by the people of Red Mountain that basically say save Thacker Pass, life over lithium. Well, I talked to my neighbor. They asked what you've been doing. I've been driving down, whatever.
You told me you've been down there a lot too, and I'm like, what are you doing down there?
Just all of a sudden, I said, oh, is that what those signs are about along the?
Totally. Well, it's like when it's because we met during the fighting the Boise Upzone and educating the people about the Boise Upzone, and people don't have any idea of what adding the problems that come from adding density and with the infrastructure and tree canopy and more crowded.
The loss of the existing affordable housing.
Exactly. People think, what I feel we're entering is almost a dangerous time for humanity where it's crazy. Maybe it's always been like this, but when someone tells a person something in the government or the business and they're like, okay, they do no more digging or no more research.
Exactly.
It's scary.
And because, newspapers, and, media.
Media has, I think, basically abandoned us. They're not working.
Environment, they totally abandoned. As a public lands activist, you get the happy stories and you get the occasional.
But you don't get that deep.
You don't get the details.
Looking for the truth
to understand what's going on.
And the investigative journalism, the kind of journalism that is going to put you on a list of, hey, you're blacklisted. That's what we need right now. It's a huge opportunity.
Yes. Because that otherwise these people just live in this bubble of illusion that they're doing a great and good thing. And they're saving the planet. And then you look at how much energy does it take for these things, and are you And are you saving the planet by wrecking
exactly
some of the last
right? Are you
places?
really saving the planet by driving an electric car
Yeah.
that had this whole, And I don't mean to be, I use cordless tools like that
Yeah.
too. But as long as hey, there was a cost to this,
Yes,
an ecological and a human cost and all these things.
Yes.
But I think people just get in this mindset of because they want to feel like they're doing the right
Yes,
thing.
I know. We
You know,
want to feel good. Yeah, we want to feel like we're doing.
You know?
Most people want to feel like they're doing
They
good.
do. They want to be
things.
part of the solution. They want to
Yeah.
be part of the, because who doesn't love the planet?
Yeah. Yeah, and we need.
We just need we need information.
We need information and understanding, and a way to get the word out about what's going on, so people can make informed decisions, and so the wool can't be pulled over our eyes.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I've seen this attached to different issues. Let's just say human trafficking issues. They say that once good people know what's happening, it'll stop.
Yeah.
Right, when they really know, and I think that ideology transfers to all issues, environmental, whatever it is. Once people know what's happening and the public wakes up and says, you know what, no, we're not going to allow this.
Yeah. Well, see, and you brought up human trafficking. Well, a big issue, especially in tribal communities, is man camps. Okay. If you remember, pipelines, the Dakota Access Pipeline, that sort of came up in, that was sort of brought to awareness there, that these huge energy companies go in and they build this big project, or oil and gas exploitation in places. You bring in all these workers, they're overwhelmingly male.
Sure.
And tribal women go missing.
See, that's something no one knows about. Yeah, something no one talks about.
To build these, the big buildups of things like a lithium mine takes a big, huge, workforce. And then those jobs go away. And
good point.
Yeah, and my understanding is, talking to someone that took Catherine Cortez Masto's staffers out on the ground in the Thacker Pass area, that they were concerned about man camps. So here she turns around and introduces this bill.
Just totally oblivious, about face.
Yeah, would facilitate, make mining even easier. So all these issues. To me, this is an issue. Okay, man camps. Well, shouldn't that maybe be considered in an environmental analysis of a mine? How will this be dealt with? What mechanisms will be in place to reduce the impacts?
They just go forward.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So there's so much to what's going on with lithium mining, the green energy transition.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I also think people are overwhelmed, and they don't know how to because there's so much information out that they don't know how to decipher it, to sift through it, to get it. And so I think people are like, oh, it's such a big beast. I don't know how to tame it. I don't know how to find the actual truth. They just don't look at all.
Yeah.
Are you finding that?
I
mean, you.
Well, what I'm finding, once people know. Once you talk to somebody, like talking to you say, oh my God, there's a lot to this. But like we were talking about, trying to get through that wall where the information isn't there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Well, it becomes where do you start, and where do you, that's why I say finding people who have, my big thing is I love people who have deep, intimate knowledge about certain areas, and then just give them a platform and share it, whether it's, like the built environment, like with Dave Kangas or you. I mean, because people the average everyday person doesn't have access to that information. They don't know what you know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and, and of course my perspective is, 30 years of battling agencies over various issues, but there's this whole way of thinking about whether it be the EPA, whether it be the Interior Department, whatever, our federal agencies, Food and Drug Administration, you name it, they're captured
They are. That's what
They
I'm finding
totally
too. I mean, a lot of my research is in the food industry from maybe 20 years. Reading books and studying all these things. And I didn't realize the last 3 years when it started to become apparent that those agencies are captured. Because before I just was like, okay, clearly they're looking at a different science book than I am, right? I don't eat those foods that they say I should eat. I'm over here.
That stuff you're putting on the strawberries.
Yes, exactly. So I kind of came through that way, but I didn't even know, even after studying food in the food industry for like 15, 20 years, I didn't know that those agencies were captured. I think it's just now coming to light. Yeah. But they've been captured, haven't they?
Yeah, they've been captured for a long, long time. And if you listen, with like the, rise or whatever, or to prominence of, Robert F. Kennedy now.
Yeah, I love him.
Now, he's been talking about agency capture, and it indeed is true.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what form of government we've been brainwashed, we've been lied to.
Yeah, we have.
And the agencies, working through these NEPA processes. Well, they're going through these foreordained conclusions, but the capture just has gotten bigger and bigger and more grotesque, I think.
Yeah.
Just totally more grotesque over time.
Yeah, and it's becoming it's becoming so apparent, and even we saw it in Boise here, where the city government, they had an agenda. Yeah. And they made it look like we got public input and engagement, but they were going to that place no matter what. I mean, they didn't need any of that, and that was all just, they didn't. It's becoming so obvious and clear to a person who's even observing a little bit that government's just steamrolling. Before they would, seem like they had some good engagement, but now it's just obvious.
Yeah, it's obvious. Yeah, and engagement theater is how I think it's best described, because we all play our roles. We're dutiful little citizens.
We've got our scientists. We got our the lawyers that say it's good. We've got and it's just okay. But meanwhile, the American public is like, no, it's not good. It doesn't feel good.
Or I really don't understand what's going on. But well,
Well, and back to the zoning, it's a complex issue, and I looked at all these articles from around the country because I really wanted to understand it myself, and it goes back to the thing, most people aren't going to take the time. They're just going to go, my government says this is good, I guess it is. Otherwise they would have to invest, like you and I probably did, hours upon hours upon hours of research, which most people aren't going to do.
Or you show up down there over the years, and you just see how it works.
Yes.
And you see the same people that are saying, even under our existing supposed controls, we really don't have to do this, we'll do that. And with the zoning, they're giving away their ability to negotiate for more lower income.
And it seems like it's a similar thing, with this mining. They're giving away the power to these corporations.
Exactly.
And it's just
looting
happening.
and pillaging.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah, and people don't realize that once you lose the rights to engage or to actively manage your federal lands or whatever, it's not coming back.
No. And you go down there to the mine site now, thousands of acres. It's the development has started. It's nothing. It's hard to imagine how grotesque it will be in the end. Thacker mine. No trespassing.
Sure.
Whatever. No trespassing signs.
Stay out. They'll have guards down there, right? They'll have a whole team, security team.
Oh yeah, allied security, whatever they're called now. Yeah, exactly.
To protect their interests, right?
To protect their interests. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate this, Katie.
Okay, well, thank you.